Hi, I'm Jim, and I was retired. This week, the Federal Open Market Committee met and decided to pause on rates for the eighth time since July 2023. But the real news was the latest summary of economic projections and the infamous dot plot. Now, many viewers wonder why a DIY retiree is talking about the FOMC and the dot plot. But stay tuned, and I'll show you how I use this information in my DIY retirement investing. Retirees care about inflation, and you want to make sure that your savings are earning real rates greater than inflation. So, ignoring the Fed in your DIY retirement? That's crazy. A little bit more background. I watched the Federal Open Market Committee, or FOMC, carefully because I am a DIY retiree and I want to know the direction of the interest rates in my portfolio. And in this video, I will explain how I'm using this data in my DIY retirement investment. Now, I'll begin with a version of my standard warning. I'm not an economist, but I play one on this little TV. Spending nearly 40 years in financial public relations means I've acquired a working knowledge of macroeconomics. I may not know what that means, but I can definitely tell you what this means. And prices affect a retiree. So it's time to understand. And I know that the Fed is the primary driver of the course of inflation. So as a DIY retiree, I care. But first, please like and subscribe to this channel if you like entertaining ideas from a DIY retiree. I'm not selling a course, I'm just sharing my perspective to help you prepare for your own DIY retirement. Now, here's a chart that I share on my X feed, my Twitter feed, and you can subscribe to me there with the same handle at I was retired. Now, in March of 2024, the last time the FOMC published their dot plot, the median value of a year-end Fed funds rate for 2024 was 4.6%. That would have required at least 3 quarter-point cuts later this year. See that green line up there for the upper Fed funds rate, now at 5.5%? Well, that infamous dot plot we just got this week suggests only one more cut before the end of the year with a median rate of 5.1%. So the Fed is pushing back the number and timing of any rate cuts. But the CME FedWatch tool, which uses market data to see where the rate is going to go, they're suggesting a year-end rate below 5%, which would require at least 2 cuts. Now, here's a chart from the CME FedWatch probabilities page, and it shows that nearly 88% are betting on no change in July, but there's a 78% chance for a first rate cut in September, and then a 98% chance for another cut in December. Now, those are the aggregate meeting probabilities. Now, as I mentioned, they go through these dot plots 4 times a year with a summary of economic projections. And that also gathers projections from the participants, the 7 governors and 12 leaders of the Federal Reserve banks. They also put in projections for the GDP readings and the unemployment rates, but the focus has been on the dot plot for the representation of what the participant believes the ideal Fed funds rate will be at the end of each year. It's taken on a life of its own. A year ago, in June of 2023, the SEP dots showed that most participants thought the year-end rate in 2023 would be above 5.5%. And that would have anticipated 2 quarter-point hikes. And we did get one in July of 2023, but we never got the second one. In September 2023, the dots showed that 12 participants expected one more rate hike in November or December, but 7 were content to leave it where it was after the July rate hike. And in December, the dots confirmed no more rate hikes were expected. It's amazing how the December dot plot is the only one that's accurate. Then in March of 2024, the dots were all over the place again for the year-end 2024 rate. Only 4 there thought that it would be above 5%. And as I mentioned earlier, the median was 4.6%. And in this latest June 2024 dot plot, the dot suggests 11 participants believe the year-end rate will be above 5%, and 8 believe it will be just under 5%. And that gives you a median rate of 5.1%. And that's about one more rate cut of a quarter point before the end of this year. Now, all these dots drive so many people crazy. Some have suggested it's time to blow this whole thing up, and I've shown this animation before. There is one former Fed policymaker who wants more dots for the GDP and unemployment rates, but most want to find a more effective way of communicating the path of monetary policy. The problem is the participants around the table. Congress created the Federal Reserve and the FOMC with a decentralized structure with both public and private voices. The Fed has a dual mandate for price stability and maximum employment. People call those who are concerned about the labor market doves, and those that are more concerned about price stability hawks. The president appoints the chair of the Board of Governors with the advice and consent of the Senate, and Chair Jerome Powell is the most visible face of the Fed. But there are 6 other governors that have been appointed by the president and approved by the Senate. So only 2 of those from the prior administration are considered hawks, and the rest are considered doves. To ensure monetary policy represents the whole nation and not just Washington, Congress also gave votes to 5 of the 12 presidents of the regional reserve banks in any given year. The president of the New York Fed always votes because that's where the trading desk is located, along with 4 other presidents whose votes rotate so that the voting members come from different parts of the country in any given year. In 2024, Richmond, Cleveland, Atlanta, and San Francisco vote with New York. And only Loretta Mester in Cleveland is considered a hawk. Most are considered doves. Now, as I'll cover in a moment, Loretta has left us. She won't vote again due to a forced retirement at the end of this month. A new president will be on board to vote in September, as I'll explain. In 2025, the presidents of Chicago, Boston, St. Louis, and Kansas City will vote. Now, 2 are likely hawks, but we won't know until they vote. The others are doves. Now, in 2026, Cleveland will get to vote again. Will that seat remain a hawk? We're not sure. Minneapolis will be a hawk, but the rest are likely to be doves. Even if you count Powell as a hawk, and some do and some don't, you can see there are a lot of doves around this table. By the way, that's my personal view on hawks and doves around the table. Most policymakers will disavow the labels. One former Fed policymaker preferred to be called an owl. But the Fed watchers have also assigned these labels, and I've shared this chart before, and I'll put a link to it below. This is the latest one. Now, Loretta Mester was a true PhD in monetary macroeconomics. That's her life. She studied the Fed and monetary policy all of her career. She retires at the end of this month. Now, the Cleveland Fed has announced that Beth Hammack, an investment banker from Goldman Sachs, will be the next president. And she'll start on August 21st. So she will not be at the July FOMC meeting. But as this little paragraph from a recent article, and I'll share it in the notes below, notes, FOMC voting rules mean that if there is no Cleveland president to vote at the July meeting, that vote will be cast by the alternate FOMC member, which would be Austin Goolsbee of Chicago, and he's definitely a dove. Now, what do I do with this information? Well, it leads me to believe that I'll have the balance of 2024 and into 2025 to lock in some rates in my bucket 1 and bucket 2 fixed income investments, CDs and treasury bills and notes. I'm going to not try to find the exact top of these interest rates before they start falling as the Fed lowers rates, but I'm going to implement those changes based on what I'm following with the Fed. Now, I'll conclude by saying I'm not an economist, I'm just an avid Fed watcher. And I'll conclude with my standard warning, I have no initials after my name. So take these as entertaining ideas from one educated consumer to another. Always do your own due diligence and seek out a professional if you need one.